There are 3 stages to digital transformations, with the 3rd stage being the most successful phase and the most important phase of digital transformation, but most organizations fail to reach that 3rd stage of success. I'm going to talk about what you can do differently to make sure your digital transformation reaches the 3rd stage of success. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of 3rd Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients through their digital transformation journeys. When we first started and named the company 3rd Stage, it was named after a rocket launch analogy. So when rockets launch, historically there were 2 stages or 2 boosters that got the rocket up into space, but it was the 3rd stage launch from those boosters, from the 2 boosters, that would get it up into its ultimate height and speed and up into orbit. And that was a big part of why the company is named 3rd Stage, and I felt like that was a good analogy for digital transformations, because many digital transformations fail to reach that 3rd stage. They fail to get off the ground, they fail to fight gravity, and they have that inertia that they have trouble getting past. So we really like that analogy as a way to talk about how digital transformations go and what some of the challenges are that organizations face. So what I want to talk about today are, why is it that most organizations fail to reach that 3rd stage of success? What are the ones that do reach that 3rd stage? What are they doing differently? And more importantly, what can you be doing differently to reach that 3rd stage of success? When we look at companies that are successful and that have reached that 3rd stage of success, one of the biggest things they do well and better than their counterparts that don't reach that 3rd stage is they do business process alignment well. They don't simply defer to the technology and assume that the technology is going to solve their business problems for them. They define how they want to solve the business problems and what they want their operations to look like, and then find ways to use technology to automate that. So, for example, a lot of times what happens is organizations will choose a new technology. The software vendor or the sales reps will convince the organization that they don't need to worry about their business processes because their new technology has best practices in it, or industry best practices, and therefore they will come in with the answers of how the business processes should look. Now, that may be true at the granular level of how transactions work within a software system, but that's not true at the high level of how you want your business to function. So that's one problem with that philosophy. The other problem with that same flawed approach that software vendors typically perpetuate is that today's technology is very flexible and can handle a plethora of different workflows and business processes and different options within the system. So to assume that somehow the software vendor or the software solution itself is going to answer the question of how to run your business for you, it's simply not true. You need to have a clear vision of what you want your business processes to look like. Now, it's not only an upfront decision that needs to happen well in determining business process alignment, but we also need to make sure that as we're implementing technology and ultimately going live with the new technology, that we figured out and determined how that technology is going to be embedded within our business processes. So it's one thing to get the technology to work and to do what you want it to do, but it's a very different thing now to figure out how to embed that within your day-to-day operations. We find that a lot of times organizations will implement new technology, but the people don't use it. So if the people aren't using it and the business processes aren't fully in sync with those new technologies, it doesn't matter that the technology works, because it's really not working. It's not working for your business. So organizations that reach that 3rd stage of success know how to handle business process alignment very well, and they also are very good and adept at defining ways that business processes will improve and leveraging the technology to enable those improvements. One of the biggest things holding companies back from reaching that 3rd stage of success is organizational change management, or lack thereof. Most organizations are so focused on the technology, maybe they're focused on the business processes, but they're rarely focused enough on the organizational change management or the people side of the equation. So organizations that are successful, let's look at what they do well, what they do differently. What they do well and what they do differently is, for example, organizational design. They define what people's roles and responsibilities are going to look like in the future. They take the time to define that future state organization. And more importantly, they take the time to start rolling out those changes to the organization before they get to go live training and the end of project type of communications that most people think of when they think of change management. So there's a lot of upfront strategic work that needs to happen to ensure that the training and communication stuff later in the project are going to be successful. Another example of something that needs to happen early on that most organizations overlook is an organizational assessment, and really understanding your culture, what the potential pockets of resistance are going to be, which every organization faces resistance, whether you know it now or not. Your organization will face resistance to any sort of changes you might want to roll out. But the key is, how do we assess your organization in your situation so that we can define a change strategy that's very specific to your needs and very surgical and focused to what your change needs are. So organizations that are successful and effectively handle organizational change management are the ones that are more likely to succeed. Now, for more information on organizational change management, I've included a link below to a guide to how to manage organizational change. And it's perfect for anyone going through an organizational change project or a digital transformation of any sort. So I encourage you to download that link as a follow-up item. Another differentiator for organizations that reach that third stage of success is business and technology integration. So in other words, not just implementing technology and business process changes in isolation from one another, but looking at the entire big picture of how this is all going to fit together. How will our business processes flow? What will those handoffs between processes or different parts of our organization, what will that look like? And with technology, we also have to look at how does our technology interact with one another? How are we going to tie this all together? How is data going to flow? What's the single source of truth going to be? Where's that data going to reside? How are we going to manage the master data longer term? All those sorts of questions are things that aren't necessarily critical to implementing technology per se, but they are critical to getting the full business value out of your digital transformation. And that's one of the things that companies that reach the third stage of success do well, is they get the ROI and the business value that they expect out of their digital transformations. Another common afterthought that's a big mistake in digital transformations is data and security. So the technology might be in place, technology's working, you've tested it, even if you've aligned it with your business processes, you've managed change well, it can all fail if you don't have a solid focus on data and security. And what we mean by this is a couple things. One is you want to make sure that the data you're bringing over to the new technology is clean, that it's the right data, that you've cleaned it up, that you've mapped it to the new system appropriately. The other thing we want to do is ensure that we have master data management processes in place to ensure that once we have the data brought over and we've cleaned it up, we've mapped it over to the new system, that we're not corrupting the data because people aren't tracking the data or maintaining the data the way they should. So we want to set up a master data management processes that enable data to remain clean even after implementation. And then the final part of this is the whole security aspect of things. How do we ensure that we don't just hacker-proof our systems and ensure that people can't hack into the system, but just as importantly, maybe even more importantly, is make sure that we tightened up the security within the new technologies so that people internally are only accessing what they should be accessing, and so that we have the right division of controls and the right separation of duties so that organizations aren't faced with situations where, for example, an employee can create a new vendor in the system and then go pay a new vendor, which theoretically that person could create themselves as a vendor and go pay themselves some amount of money. So we want to do that via security profiles and different security mechanisms within technology to ensure that we avoid that common security problem. Testing is another common problem with transformations. Now, most organizations know that they need to test. Most organizations don't simply skip over the testing process, but the way they do it is significantly flawed. Typically, testing is more focused on ensuring that the technology works from a technology perspective. In other words, making sure we worked out all the bugs and that the technology is sound. But that's not nearly as important as making sure that the technology works for our business. So the user acceptance testing or the conference room pilots is what I'm talking about here. So really making sure that we've worked through all the different scenarios and the major exceptions that we might see in our day-to-day operations, and ensuring that we've worked through all that stuff, because not only is it important to ensure that we've defined our processes and our technologies clearly, but also to make sure that people internally within the company understand how those new processes are going to work and have been a part of testing and making sure that we've poked holes in it. And that can be very helpful from not just a testing perspective, but also from a change management and communications perspective as well. So making sure that you have a very robust testing process is very important. So when you're looking at your vendor's proposed testing plan, you want to make sure that you've added some buffer to that to account for your own user acceptance testing in addition to the technology testing that they might be doing. And then finally, when we look at what companies that reach the third stage are doing differently to fully realize the value of their investments in technology, it's benefits realization. And benefits realization, in its simplest terms, is really a way to define what it is you expect to get out of your new system, and then actually go measure the actual results after you've gone live with the new technology or technologies. And this is an area that so many companies overlook, they don't even think about doing. And the value of doing what I'm suggesting here is that the level of effort and cost to do this is so minimal when compared to the overall time and cost and effort that's gone into the technology implementation, and the value you get out of it is so massive. So it's important to do this, but one of the problems people run into is they're afraid to go back and look at what results are we actually achieving, because chances are, quite frankly, you're not going to have achieved the benefits you expected right away, and that's the whole point of going through a benefits realization exercise, to ensure that we look at where we're achieving our benefits and where we're not achieving our benefits, and where we're not achieving our benefits, what is it we need to do to tweak our deployment to make sure that we fix those problems. And a lot of times it's real simple things. It's things like we didn't train this group on how to use this certain function within the system, and that's undermining our business benefits. Think about that for a minute, and the level of effort that would take versus the amount of effort it just took to go through the entire transformation. It's pretty minimal, but the amount of impact it has on positive ROI is huge. So we have a lot of lessons from organizations that have gone through this benefits realization process. I'd be happy to share notes with you, so feel free to reach out if you'd like to discuss this or any of the other concepts in more detail. So these are just some of the things that we commonly see organizations do wrong that undermines their ability to reach that third stage of success. In addition to the things we've talked about in this video, there's also things that you could be doing from a quality assurance perspective. And I have other videos out there on our channel. We have other content on our website related to this whole topic of quality assurance. So I encourage you to check that out, or I've included some links below as well. But the concept behind quality assurance is really making sure that we look at the implementation to identify risk throughout the implementation from an independent technology agnostic perspective, to ensure that we're identifying those risks early on in the project and that we're doing the things right that we need to be doing to achieve that third stage of success. So having a solid project management and quality assurance framework in place can be one of the best ways to address the things we've talked about in this discussion, but also uncover other risks that we haven't talked about in this discussion as well. So I hope you found this information useful and hope you have a great day.